Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to a May 29th edition of the MSP Initiative, MSP Talk. May 29th. That means we're almost at summertime, at least here on this side of the world. And I'm looking forward to it. It's been really cold, wet, and rainy. I feel like we never got out of like winter, spring here here in Philly area. MSPinitiative.com. This is where we park most of the stuff that we do. You will see sessions like the one that we are on right now, recorded in podcast, audio, video format. So whichever works best for you. We have some upcoming events that are coming up for the larger MSP IT services community. We are headed to DattoCon Dublin, I think for the third year in a row. So we're excited for that one coming up here in just a couple weeks. And then just right after that, maybe like the week and a half later, is uh, Flow, which is a conference run by our friends at Roost in Tampa. So we'll be down there with those guys. And then we have some other stuff coming on the tail end of the year, right? September, October, November. We call that the gauntlet. That's when a lot of things happen in our industry. For some reason, everybody does it at the same time. But we have some cool stuff that we have baking. So stay tuned for some announcements as we get closer towards the back end of the summertime. We'll talk to you about what's coming up here in the fall. I'm kind of pumped for what we're working on. All right. So without further ado, we haven't had anyone on for a little while from our friends over at Threatlocker. We bring Oliver on today. How you doing, Oliver?
Good, thanks, George. Thanks for having me.
Oh, absolutely welcome. Where are you based, Oliver?
I'm in Orlando, so I'm in the sunshine, I'm afraid to say, at the moment. Although this time last week I was in Canada, where I moved down to Orlando from Canada last week. So
Okay. All right. That's a big climate shift for you.
yeah, shocking, I'd say.
Yes, I'm sure. I'm sure. How is Threatlocker HQ? How's my buddy Shane doing down there?
Shane's doing good. Shane is being Shane, so that's great. No, it's a nice atmosphere in the office. It's great to be here working with people in person rather than being remote. I really enjoy it.
That's no for sure. To be honest with you, if I could work it that way, I would. I feel like if I'm not, working at from home, I felt like I'm constantly out and about on the road. The people that live that life. But I digress. Um, so Threatlocker, I mean, listen, you guys do 50 events a month or almost 500+ events a year. You're out
Yeah,
there for sure. People are like 500 events a year. Are there even 500 events to go to? Yes, there
for
are.
yeah.
Like if you think about like some companies that may not even do 50 events a year, they're doing 50 events a month. So congrats to Heather and the team over there for like keeping the logistics under control because that is a lot of moving parts. But I want to rewind to not that long ago. Like we're not even at the halfway point of the year, and you guys run the big conference down in
Oh
Orlando
yeah, Zero Trust
every
World.
year.
Yeah.
And Zero Trust, yeah. And this year was, I think the biggest, like I think it was the third or fourth year of Zero Trust. I forget, something like that.
Yeah, I think it's the fourth year. It's the biggest one yet.
And I
Yeah, it
think
was
you had
great
like
to have so many
1,500 people
people
there.
there. Yeah, it was very, very busy. Yeah, a great time had by all, from what I've heard. It was very
Yeah.
good.
I was at two of the four, so I'm a
Okay.
fan. I'm a fan. I'll have to make it down for next year.
Yeah,
Um,
that'd be great.
Obviously, when everybody runs a big event like that is when all the cool new stuff's, talked about. And I think, even though you guys do a lot of marketing, right? I think a lot of people may have missed that there is a pretty significant expansion in like what the platform that is now known as Threatlocker does, right? Like, so I just wanted to like, I usually leave this for the tail end, but it's going to lead into a lot of other topics I want to cover today. So maybe we can rewind and just talk about like the core Threatlocker product. I think everybody's familiar with. If you're not familiar with it, I don't know where you've been living, maybe under a rock. That's like the ring fencing and the application control. Like that's like at
Yeah.
the heart, right, of what we know as Threatlocker. But it has seriously expanded. So like just give us a high level overview of like what it is today. And I think a lot of this stuff came out at Zero Trust World. So maybe for the people who didn't pay attention or weren't there, paint the picture for us.
Can do a quick rundown. I actually used to be a sales engineer, so I should be able to get through this pretty quick.
Okay.
So, yeah, as you said, we've got the kind of core components, which would be application control, so application allow listing, ring fencing, where we put controls around those apps to prevent them doing things that maybe they shouldn't be doing. We've got an elevation control component for privilege access management. The more kind of recent additions, network control, so basically an endpoint-based firewall with dynamic access controls. At Zero Trust World, we recently announced web control, so kind of content filtering via the agent, and then something that's
Would you,
really growing.
so can I pause you right there? I know a lot of people who have been around for a while. Like I remember the days of Open DNS and like that whole
Yeah,
thing. Would you call it something very similar to that?
yeah, I'd say very similar to that. Yeah, the big kind of differentiator I'd say would be that when we block something, let's say you're trying to go to a gambling website, rather than it just not working, we'll actually give you the option to request access and explain why you want to access that site, and then exceptions can be made.
Okay. And that's happening at an agent level on the machine.
Exactly, yeah. We
Okay.
have some kind of conditional access type controls around Office 365 now, so we will allow access to your tenant based on the presence of our agent, including on mobile devices as well. And then our MDR product is really growing as well.
Okay, so you actually have something in the category of, and there's a lot of names out there, right? It could be, you know, um, you know, Sentinel One or CrowdStrike
Exactly.
or
Yeah,
Blackpoint or whatever, right? Like there's a lot of them out there now. So you have your own version of this category.
that's correct. Yeah.
So let me just recap real quick because I know we just said a lot of things. You have your DNS content filtering, which I think a lot of people didn't even realize, probably not even me until you just said it. You have Office 365 external conditional access, which is separate from what you get inside of 365. We'll talk about that a little bit more. We have the network and firewalling utility, which is probably not the same as like the Windows firewall, right? It's like a third, it's like separate from that, but like probably has some sort of security mindset where like you can, you know, silo that machine if it's found to be a rogue agent, right? Like put it off into the side. Okay.
Or let's say you've got an RDS server, we could create a policy that says only computers that belong to you running Threatlocker can access
Okay.
that
I
port
like
filtering.
that. All right. And then you have the core product with, the application control and ring fencing. I kind of put that into the original, one,
Yeah.
bucket there. And then what was the last one? Oh, the MDR.
Elevation. Oh,
Oh,
MDR and the elevation
MDR. And
control. Yeah,
then privilege access management with the yes, no while we're in the middle. So that's like,
exactly.
I count that as six different categories of things.
Lots to keep up with here for sure.
All right.
Lots to support.
No, hey, listen, I think the goal here, and this is kind of going to go into my first kind of big topic to chat through is, and that's not necessarily a new topic, but it's a relevant one, which is a lot of moving parts, right? Like everybody's saying security is supposed to be layered. We've heard this over and over again. I know some MSPs that have like 18 separate products when it comes to this conversation. And like, by the way, we can talk all about the merits of picking best in class, not having all your eggs in one basket, and there's a lot of truth to that. I mean, to be honest
Yep.
with you, and Oliver, we're going to go into Microsoft land for a minute because you can't. I feel like we can't avoid it. Microsoft has a lot of security stuff baked into their own platform, right? Like if you go to just 365, which everybody knows, whether you call it M365, Office 365, Copilot 365. I don't know. They keep on changing the marketing, but I think we know what we're talking about. So, like, you have the six original plans: Business Basic, Business Standard, Business Premium, E1, E3, or E3, E5. I'm sorry, right? And then there's like M3, M5, right? But whatever. There's like the six original plans. So when you get to Business Premium, they try and put some security in there, and then like on the higher plans, they can add some more security in there. I've actually read in a couple of places, like within the last week, that like Microsoft's, I was joking with a colleague of mine. I was like, I feel like Microsoft, when they created the 365 plans, like looked at the BMW line card and just like Xeroxed it, right? Like
Yeah.
X1, X3, X5. So there's somebody was like, well, Microsoft usually around this time is they introduce higher level products. Like there's like a cyclical version of Microsoft where every so many years new stuff comes out. And they're like, I wouldn't be surprised if you saw uh, instead of, E5 is like the top right now, like they'll include E7, E8, right? Like the next, and like, I was like, what would they include? More security, more stuff. And so, I get back to the concept of all your eggs in one vendor's basket, right? Microsoft's a big guy. Nobody, like, I guess my big beef, other than, hey, if Microsoft gets compromised, what is it all bad? Is some of it bad? I guess a lot of scenarios we can talk through, but and they've had problems like everybody else. Probably the flip side of that is the business side of it, Oliver, and I'll stop here so we can like recollect the thought. I feel like if you just look at the last 36 months of Microsoft, the price has changed every year and it's not gone down. It's gone up. So like they're forcing everybody into paying annually and they're forcing everybody into paying more. And so the price that I expect today, like I think they just had a price increase April 1st, like a couple months ago. So like I feel like they have been maybe they learned a lesson. Don't price shock everyone all at once, but they have consistently been moving the needle up every year. So so back to A, too many eggs in one basket. B, can I do it affordably? Right? Like that kind of rolls into if I don't go into one basket and I have to do this potpourri of vendors where I got 20, 18, 20 different things to manage, I would argue the average MSP has a problem managing all of that on a day to day. So I'm rolling all of that into one conversation. What's good? What's bad? You tell me.
Yeah, so before I was at Threatlocker, I actually worked at an MSP in Toronto, Canada for like 11 years. And we needed to get certifications to understand the offerings from Microsoft. Not necessarily to be compliant or had to have the certification, it's just to try and understand. And I think it reminded me of like when you're trying to choose a TV package, or maybe you only want one channel, and they're like, well, if you want that channel, you've got to get the top tier package. You're like, well, I don't need all the other channels, and it's kind of seems like that. So, and I think a lot of people don't take into consideration that it's not necessarily about what the MSP can afford and what they're willing to pay, but it's what their customers are willing to pay. Because I mean, ultimately, someone's got to pay for it. So you've got all these different best in class products and everyone wants $1 to $3 per month from you, and that mounts up pretty quick. So I think there's got to be a bit of a balance between what's convenient for management for the MSP, so you don't have to sign into 20 different portals, but also a little bit of insurance that if something does break, you have some kind of backup product somewhere there as well.
Yeah, there's convenience, like the management, like, so there's convenience factor on just operating your technology on a day to day. And we can argue that the end users hate change. But then there's also the convenience factor of can the MSP function profitably, right? Like I always,
Absolutely.
I hate to put on my business hat, but I feel like it's something that's often overlooked. Time, cliche here, time has a cost. There is like every business, whether you've done the math or not, you should be able to understand what your effective cost is per man hour, right? And so if I got to spend 20x the amount of time in order to manage all these tools, am I charging effectively for it? Because I hate the reality of an MSP who says, all right, Oliver, you're charging me $1 per endpoint. I'm just going to make it $3 per endpoint, but the $2 in what I consider profit on top of that dollar that I'm paying you as the vendor doesn't really cover my cost of time. So
No.
like by the time you add it all up and you multiply it by the number of, users you're managing and devices underneath of them, like can quickly sprawl out of control.
Yeah, and even if you're doing things with the best kind of reasoning behind it, for example, if you go to a customer and say we need to up your price by a couple of bucks a month because this new tool we're adding to try and help you prevent ransomware, they may just turn around and say, hey, well, I haven't had ransomware up to now, so why do I need this as well? And it's hard to explain. It almost makes it sound like you're adding something because you missed it before. It's very complicated, and I feel
No, that
for MSPs.
100% fair. I mean, hey, have car insurance. Never got into an accident, but
Yeah, I
the
don't need
day
that.
that you did, you needed it.
Yeah,
And if you haven't had an accident, and I love the people who are like, man, you get a lot of traffic tickets. And I'm like, but I drive a lot more than you do. Like it's just a like well, but I've been driving my entire life. I was like, yeah, but if I drive 30 or 40,000 miles in 1 year and you take 10 years to drive, like it's just a math problem, right? But I
Yeah,
digress. Um, let's get into the reality that the bad guys, I hate to go to, from a marketing standpoint, but I'm going to do it anyway. So shame on me. The bad guys are now using all these AI tools to create things that go and do bad things faster. All right. And they embed them in basic things, right? Word documents, PDFs, email attachments, whatever. And so I feel like we're still in the wild, wild west of whether it's Copilot, whether it's ChatGPT, whether it's pick whatever service, like Google has one, Elon has one over there with his X, right? Like everybody has one. And like there's not a lot of definable parameters other than you can trick it to do things that it shouldn't do,
yeah.
right? You can trick it to build bad things, right? So is the low is the bar now a lot more aggressive? Because before it was, hey, I'm going to send Oliver an email that looks like it came from Microsoft and he just typed in his password and that's easy, easy, easy. And that happens all day, by the way. It didn't stop. But like now it's gotten a bit more aggressive where like when you type in username and password, like this machine runs and it went and downloaded everything from your account before you even had, understood what happened. Like it's gotten more sophisticated. How do we use some of the technology that's now available to, you know, I guess anticipate that and prevent bleeding out and dying on the table versus a band-aid?
I'm not trying to sell Threatlocker here specifically, but I think the approach of zero trust is kind of, it's gone from being something that large enterprises used as a kind of methodology for security to now really it's getting to the stage that everybody needs to take that same approach, either with a tool or just with a mindset. If I get an email that says, click this link, even if it's from my mom and dad, like, you got to assume that it's not good, unfortunately. And that's the same with anything on a computer, I think, nowadays. Like, obviously, that's not realistic for a lot of people in terms of never clicking on a link ever again. But it is the kind of thought process we should be going through before we do anything, really.
For sure. I mean, I think just yesterday I saw an email, an article from channel company CRN saying that another MSP tool had been compromised. Right?
Okay.
This is like less than 24 hours. Should we be worried? Should the average IT services or managed services company be worried that they put themselves in harm's way by adopting a centralized tool? I almost feel silly asking this question, but it keeps happening. So what do you do?
It's a double-edged sword in terms of like they need to be able to remotely manage their machines, but it just makes it so convenient for the bad folks as well. So I think whatever tool you use, allow that tool and don't allow any others, and then ensure MFA the basics like that. But even that isn't bulletproof nowadays. There's also the risk just of legitimate tools. Like I may send you an email with a link and you click on it and it downloads something like Veeam to your machine and it starts a backup to the cloud. Like no antivirus is going to care about that because it's not a bad thing. I'm backing up the data. That's good. But it's just all of these tools that are used for good things can very easily be used for really awful things as well.
Yeah. And like the problem is that technical people can understand how to do that. Like take something that was meant for a specific thing and use it in a adjacent way that you probably weren't thinking about. But the end customer or even the power user of your end customer, they wouldn't know any different.
No, and then also any kind of barrier you put between them doing their job, it's just not going to go down very well as well. Why can't I update my QuickBooks? Why am I not a local administrator anymore? And I think very often MSPs, internal IT, whatever, we make compromises to make the noisiest of end users be happy. and that introduces a big risk, especially with the semi-technical people or the technical people that aren't actually working for the IT company, the MSP. They're the most dangerous. They'll download all sorts of things, right? So
Which brings me to the reality that I'm gonna splice two themes together, and I'm curious what you're gonna say. Um, Shadow IT and DevOps, right? Like you took a person who's maybe not even a coder, they're utilizing these new tools for zero code, right? But they're having it built by an agent or a service, right? Because they're just typing in, hey, I need something that does this, this, and this. And then all of a sudden it outputs a working, running program, right?
yep.
Um, this is now, they've made it. I hate to even use the word Fisher Price, but it's almost that way, right? Where you just kind of talk into existence what you're looking for, and then the machine runs and out comes something, and then like how do you stop somebody from hurting themselves?
Yeah, I think when I personally talk to customers or end users, um, I just try to be as transparent as possible so they don't maybe think that I'm trying to kind of talk down to them or pretending that I'm more technical than them or anything like that. So, for example, recently we had a customer where they wanted their PowerShell to be able to talk to GitHub and then anything to execute from GitHub because that's where they do their dev.
Mm-hmm.
And we had the discussion of like, you realize GitHub has plenty of bad things up there as well, and bad people will use your PowerShell to talk to GitHub to download things like ransomware. And we had just an open discussion about it, and then we were able to find a middle ground with with PowerShell only being able to talk to very specific things. So
Okay.
I think just being transparent and explaining the risks, not in a way where we're trying to like you mentioned earlier, like we're not trying to sell through fear. It's just saying, hey, yes, you can absolutely do that, but these are the risks. Maybe we could compromise and kind of meet in the middle and do this instead.
So let me ask, so that's a good question. PowerShell, on or off by default?
We approach it with the mindset that it is always on, but by default we control what it can and can't do. So, for
Okay.
example, out of the box, if you install Threatlocker, PowerShell can't talk to the internet and it can't talk to your files. But during that onboarding, we'll figure out through our learning mode what it needs to talk to. But
Interesting.
just
So
out of the
like
box, we kind
so
of
so
cripple it
so
by
not
default.
yes, not no, in between.
Yeah. So we wouldn't actually block someone from opening it up. But if they said reach out to the internet or touch my file server and try and read or write something or execute something, then our default posture will be no, it can't do that.
Okay. Good to know. I know this is a debate that happens all the time. Like, oh, PowerShell, it's so useful. It's like, yes, but it can also be bad useful.
Yep.
Um, which is interesting because even some of the RMM systems out there, they can interface with PowerShell, right?
Oh, yeah.
Again, to what end? Yeah, like with what barriers, right? But
Yeah, because people are using their RMMs to patch software, which is great because we need to do that to kind of control vulnerabilities. But the RMM is still executing something on the machines that could theoretically be anything.
yeah,
So,
for real, anything. Um, let's flip over, because we talked about Microsoft in the beginning here, but like it feels like the continuation of every desktop application that ever was. Like you said QuickBooks earlier, right? I don't even think you can get a QuickBooks. Like if you have it, you have it, but you can't buy a new one desktop, right?
well, yeah, I think it's all online now. Yeah.
You have to go. And by the way, they're another one that just raises the price every 2 seconds, right? Like I always
Mm-hmm.
get an email like, "Oh, QuickBooks Online changed their price." I was like, "You've changed your price 3 times, like in the last 6 months. What's going on? Like set the year for Anyway, um, I think there's a lot of people, and you came from the IT world and an MSP, so you'll laugh, but like, remember those Mac people back in the day who were like, "Oh, Mac don't get viruses," and it's like, what are you talking about? Oh, they don't, and I'm like. No, at the time you just weren't the easy low-hanging fruit target. So they did more of the guy like if it was for every one Mac there was 10 Microsoft machines, I'm gonna write for the 10 Microsoft. Just doesn't mean that you're immune. It's just they didn't look at you as closely as the other guy. Like fast forward,
Right.
this same mentality is being put to, well, it's SaaS. Right?
Right. Yeah.
I don't have to worry about it. That's this guy's problem. Like I pay a company, they have to secure it. Is that, just like the fallacy on the first thought, is that the same case here, or is there some truth to that?
Um, I think that mentality is absolutely correct. Like people think that, but I don't believe it's true though. Like for an example, we used to have like on-prem Exchange, and we
Mhm.
would sell people backup, and they were like, "Yeah, absolutely, you got to back up my email. If I lose that, I'm in big trouble." And you move into Office 365 and try and sell them backup for email, they're like, "No, I don't need that. It's in the cloud." And you're like, "Well, okay. Well, if you delete something, and after 30 days, it's gone." So yeah, I think that there is false sense of security going to the cloud, whereas we all know in reality the cloud is just the server sitting somewhere else physically.
So the answer is that if you don't think that there's a problem, it could be used in a way that you weren't expecting to create a bigger problem.
Yeah, and I think as we move to the cloud, it just becomes more convenient. Again, like we mentioned earlier, it becomes convenient not just for yourself, but to the people that are trying to get into your mailbox, because now they can get in from anywhere.
Yeah, which is interesting because I think I think a lot of the SaaS platform providers out there have adopted things like MFA or single sign-on, right?
Yeah.
Like that kind of thing, which is great because it takes some of the convenience factor, into the equation for sure. But when was the last time somebody backed up their QuickBooks Online?
Yeah, like there, I think people just assume, and that's dangerous. I think.
Or how
Well, I
about their
don't.
Salesforce or HubSpot account?
Yeah,
I
and I
got a lot
think,
of information there potentially, but I just assume that they have it.
yeah, and I
Hmm.
guess a lot of that is, to some regard on the MSP side, trying to educate the customers. Um, but yeah, I think the risk is it's just the same, and also from the MSP point of view, it kind of they lose control over how well protected that environment is because who knows how patched that server is. That's the QuickBooks Online is sitting. You'd hope it would be very well patched, but who knows?
That's a good question. I'm sure nobody asked the question either. Which then brings up, I'm going to use the same case point. So we said back in the day, Mac versus Windows, right? Today, desktop, locally run versus SaaS, right? What about workstation to mobile device?
Yeah, I think we're maybe a little bit behind in terms of maybe in a couple of years. I guess people will start thinking about that a bit more kind of actively. But I think at the moment, I just don't think the cell phones are used as much for the desktop level apps. But I'm sure they probably that will ramp up. I'm sure just because
I
it's so
mean, I
convenient.
mean, I've read, as we all read the feeds that come through, right? Like the marketplaces, right? Like the Android marketplace or the iOS marketplace, like they have delisted apps because they found them to be malicious.
Yeah,
And like they may send you an email. They're like, "Oh, hey, by the way, we found out you downloaded an app that we found out to be bad later." And it's like, weren't you supposed to be looking at that before you got it on, like published it to your marketplace? Like, what happened there? But okay, like damage is done. So like you don't even think about it, but like your cell phone holds a lot of information.
yeah, and I think the phones don't force you to patch the operating systems until like you've waited quite a long time as well. And I think a lot of people don't realize how bad some of the vulnerabilities are in the operating systems when they're announced.
And like,
Um,
now that you can use your mobile device as like the credit card for the, and like the,
yeah,
your,
car
there's
keys.
I think 2 or 3 states now where your ID can be a digital app on your card. I think there's a passport app now you can make it your phone. Like if
A
you have
lot
a
to
Tesla, you
lose.
can make it your car key. Like it's
Yeah,
just spirals here.
yeah, and it's not like the old style ransomware where you just lose access to something because it's encrypted. Now it belongs to somebody else now. And talking about apps, I think the same can be said for the harmless kind of Chrome and Edge extensions as well.
Ah,
Um,
yes.
I could talk
This is
about
this
those
is not
forever.
this is not a this is actually pretty recent, right? Where like I think even Google was just came out like very recently, like this quarter maybe, where they're like, hey, if you pay for Google Enterprise, you can now manage all of the extensions for all of your use. And it's like, but like it's a new program. So like everybody doesn't have that yet.
Yeah, so we treat Chrome extensions as if they're individual applications, so we can kind of say yes or no individually. And it's always interesting to kind of inventory an environment and see the kind of extensions they have. And then if you go to the Chrome store and look at under privacy, look at what that extension has access to on the machine. It's like, wow, that coupon clipper I've got can see all my data and see all my passwords and even take screenshots of my machine. It's terrifying.
So it's kind of like, to your same point, it's a similar concern with the app on your cell phone, but just now in your browser.
Yeah. Yeah. I think people don't realize that when they install the extension and say yes to whatever the terms are, it's not just within that browser window. They can go off and interrogate the file system, even on network shares as well.
And I would argue that if you think about traditional, like going back, putting my IT geek hat on here, but like group policy controls, with your Active Directory, stuff like that, even like the Nouveau version of that with Intune, with Microsoft 365, that kind of thing. This is not a very well policed conversation.
No, it's not. I mean, I think there's very few environments that actually have like a fully managed browser where they control extensions.
Yeah.
And if you sign into Google Chrome with the same account that you're signing at home, it'll sync all your extensions as well. So all of a sudden you could have Candy Crush and Honey and stuff sitting on an enterprise network. So
It's also a data leakage concern, right? Like
yeah,
you sign
and
into your
that,
browser with your personal email. Now all of a sudden you're at work, you're doing work stuff on a work machine, and oops.
yeah, and I think for organizations that have kind of heavy compliance requirements, if you read the privacy policy on some of these things, I'm sure it'll make them not compliant anymore. It's pretty
Yeah.
interesting stuff.
So just because it's not an installed application, the Chrome extension is effectively like an installed application.
Yeah, basically, depending on what you give it access to, it could have just exactly the same access that you do log into your machine.
Interesting. Um, that's a wide world of oops that you found that
Yeah, and I
out.
think a lot of the time people don't realize they've got these extensions and they might install Adobe Acrobat and there's a little checkbox at the bottom saying install Honey as well. And
They try and sneak that in whenever you install this. It's like, oh, by the way, we're gonna install
yeah,
this, and this. It's like, no, I don't want any of that. And they're like, and I was like, why do you do that? It's like, oh, that's like marketing dollars for them.
and if you click the little checkbox to say no, the first time it never works. You have to click it twice. Unless
Right.
that's me just not using a mouse,
No,
which
no,
that's
you're
possible.
right. They make it inconvenient to uncheck it.
Yeah.
Um, okay. So, it's very interesting to see kind of where we're going with all of this, because I had somebody on a few episodes ago and they were like, Apple had come out with their own security framework well before Microsoft and Microsoft adjacent products did. And the Microsoft people just didn't even realize how far along the Apple stuff had gotten to. And like almost like there's a feature not parity, imparity between, what you can or cannot do. Some of that brought up the conversation around what happened, last year with CrowdStrike, or a year and a half ago with CrowdStrike, and like how Apple, kind of controls how, applications can be installed where Microsoft doesn't police it as much. And then that whole situation opened up. I mean, kind of along the same point, since I use the word CrowdStrike, SentinelOne, like within the last 60 days, a whole bunch of stuff came out where like they weren't picking up stuff. All right. Like, and people were easily bypassing the SentinelOne MDR,
Right.
um, which kind of defeats the purpose of buying a proactive thing to prevent that. So I don't know. Like, I know you guys have an MDR, and it's not even about that. It's, hey, like, the idea of set it and forget it's not real, right? Like I install it, I think it's running, and then all of a sudden it got bypassed. What's the point?
Yeah, I think my advice, I think, for MSPs, coming from an MSP myself and now working on this side, regardless of which product you choose or which path you choose, I just try and leverage the relationship with the vendors to try and keep on top of the products because things change so fast that you might miss some, if you don't meet with them regularly or don't kind of stay engaged with them, there might be important changes, important settings to change, important improvements that you could be leveraging. So I'd say whatever product you choose, like you say, don't set it and forget it. Try and maintain that relationship to keep on top of it.
It's interesting you say that because, and I hate to pick on people, but I said their names, so let me just go backwards. Like, have you tried going to support as an MSP to CrowdStrike or SentinelOne? Because I can't call either of those companies at my size. Like, I have to,
Okay.
like, it's email only support, or I have to go through a third party to get access to them, depending on how I purchased. It kind of isn't like we all see the Reddits and the Discords and the Facebooks and the Slacks and all those places. And they always complain about support. So probably the first thing I hear about or read about, right? And the second thing I read about is my pricing changed again. Okay, fine. Um, like if I can't really get access to my vendor easily, I'm probably disenfranchised to the point where I'm not paying attention as much.
Yeah. And like so Danny Jenkins, our CEO, like he built the company from the start, really kind of support centric. So even as we've grown, like you can get through to us generally within 60 seconds. Um, and even
60
putting us,
seconds. Somebody write
yeah,
that down. I wonder how many MSPs answer their calls in 60 seconds.
yeah, no, we really pride ourselves on that. And that's a metric that's really kind of closely monitored. Um, but outside of support, like we have dedicated solutions engineers, and we recommend that our customers meet with them at least once a week when onboarding. And then after that, we can continue to meet once a week, that's fine, or at least like once a quarter, just so we can keep them up to speed and do health checks in their environment to make sure things are configured properly. Because I think a lot of the times when we hear of breaches, when people come to us and say, hey, we'd like to sign up because we've had a breach, they had all the right tools in place, and a lot of it is about misconfiguration.
Yeah.
Maybe a tool wasn't deployed to a machine automatically because of something, not set up properly in the RMM, or
I
maybe
remember
a machine was.
I was sitting at an event last year, Oliver, and they were saying that they had bought this MDR and they had left it in monitoring mode for a year. And I was like, a year? But it wasn't doing anything. And like the person who originally started the project left. And the person who came behind them never realized where they were before, and then the handoff didn't happen. And then oops.
And the thing is, that sounds bad, right? But I think it's very common, and like you got to sympathize. I think with the MSP, they're so busy. They've got so many different products that they're trying to onboard and implement and support. I remember we bought certain products that we were excited about at the beginning, and after 2 years, we canceled the contract, not because we didn't like it, because we never even used it. It's
I call
so,
that the credit card swiping fatigue.
yeah. So I think the layered approach is great. Different vendors, that's great. But I would just try and develop and maintain a relationship with the vendor. And if the vendor's not proactively trying to do that, then maybe it's not the right vendor.
That's fair. Um, I skipped over the part in the beginning where I said, "Tell me a little bit about yourself." We heard, "Hey, you're from Canada somewhere, and you came from an MSP." So let me go backwards and like just understand your journey a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Before you got to Threatlocker, what was your story?
So going right back, I mean, like I was born in England. 27 years ago, I started to work in technical support for a little internet service provider. So dial-up modems and Netscape Navigator, that kind of stuff. Um, and then really I've been in technical support in some capacity since then. Moved to Canada in 2010, and that's
Hmm.
when I started working at an MSP. I started just as a regular tech, and then I ended up as a service manager there. And I met you a few times, George, at different shows, the IT Nations. Um, yeah, so then the reason I came to Threatlocker, quite honestly, is just that it was one of the products that we had that I kind of believed in that worked. I don't think there's any magic product that's going to prevent ransomware. And I think if anybody said, hey, buy our product because you'll never get ransomware again, I'd run. I don't believe that for a second.
That's
But,
fair.
we installed Threatlocker, we used it, and we personally didn't experience ransomware across our customers. So when I fancied a change, I called up Danny and I came to work here.
That's awesome. Well, you have been, especially, different countries, three different countries, right? UK,
Yeah.
Canada, now the States. it's just we're in a very curious time, right? And I think it's an important topic because we could talk about security in a lot of different ways, but the standards are changing, the frameworks are changing. The people who write these frameworks are not the same people. Like even from 12 months ago, 16, 18 months ago. So like what is the right path, right? I know different governments like the UK has, rolled out their own like minimum standard, right? So is Australia.
Yeah.
Canada seems to not have, as firm a position. Like they seem to just feed off other people. In the US, right? Depends on who you're talking to and what agency wrote it. Like, by the way, all of that's being turned over at the moment. So are the rules that different than they were a year and a half, 2 years ago? Or are the frameworks really the same? Or like what is the general principles that we should be following?
I think my perspective is that the risk is getting realer and worse. I don't just mean you're more likely to get ransomware. I mean that it's just more damaging now when they exfiltrate the data first. Like even if you pay the ransom, I mean you could be in big trouble and most likely will be. So I think that for vendors and people like Microsoft, instead of waiting for the government to tell you what minimum standards should be enforced, people should be enforcing things like MFA,
Hmm.
like out of the box. And rather than having given you a pop-up saying you should probably turn it on, it should be on by default. And then you should have to try hard to turn it off.
I don't disagree with that. I just wonder why the like Microsoft, and they haven't even done it across the board yet. They've done it for
No.
administrator accounts. Like last year, they just enforced it. But I could, somebody could go sign up for Office 365 today and they'll encourage you to turn it on, but it's not on by default.
Yeah. And I think that you mentioned earlier about the fake login page, typing in your password. The chances are maybe 50% of people know that happened to them, and the other 50% are sending out spam and having their email monitored, and they just have no idea.
Yeah. I actually had a vendor in the space in MSP land. It's not a huge, sandbox. And I started spamming stuff out. And I was like, that doesn't look right. I was like, somebody should let him know. I think his mailbox got compromised.
Yeah, I had it a couple of times recently, just from companies that I used to work with in Canada that I know of. Email, can I call you about a gift card? I'm like,
Mm.
here we go.
Gift card scam. It's funny. There are these like services they sell for like sales people, right? Sales prospecting and SDRs and stuff like that. And then like they scrape the internet for your contact info, right? And then now the bad guys sign up for their services to get like your cell phone number, and then they send you a text. You know what I mean? Like they're like, well, how did they get your information? They're using back to the adjacent uses, right? They're using a legitimate tool that is sold for legitimate purposes, and they're using it in an illegitimate way.
Yeah, no, it's this is something probably important for MSPs to keep in mind, like on their tech machines. Their tech computers have got all the tools that a bad person would ever need kind of pre-installed. Things to interrogate networks, remote this, remote that. Hopefully not save credentials to the RMM, but I remember when I worked at an MSP, I didn't own the MSP, but I would still be worried about compromises because of the knock-on effect to your customers. And I think it's a scary time to be an MSP, quite honestly.
Yeah, I echo that. I've argued the point that I was joking with some of the people on my team, and I was like, if I can lose enough weight, maybe and I'm short enough, I could be a horse jockey, right? And they were like, "Hey George, did you know you need a license to be a horse jockey?" I was like, "Get out." They're like, "Yeah, you actually have to get a license from the government to be a horse jockey." I was like, I didn't know that." They're like, "But you don't need one to be an MSP." I'm like, "Fair, true." And I was like, "So it's easy to just say you're in the business, right?" But I think to your point, the liability now in 2025 is worse than it was in 2015 and definitely more than 2005. Like
Oh
it is
yeah.
dramatically pressured on the person who's in the chair at the MSP. Like you can be dragged into a legal situation 18 different ways.
So I think it used to be just random organizations being targeted. No one ever really went specifically after MSPs. But I think people quickly learn that, hack one MSP and you have keys to maybe, 20, 40, 100 different organizations. And like you say, there's no kind of qualifications or certifications required to become an MSP. Just, hey, I can fix your stuff, and then all of a sudden you've got to have access to lots of machines.
Yeah, so obviously there's an education, factor here that hopefully over time people learn, the right way, whatever that is. But it's just curious, right? So we're in 2025. If I were to, say, Oliver, take out your crystal ball. What does the MSP look like in 2030? Do you think by that
Wow.
point you're going to need a license to be an MSP? You're going to need more things to be able to be insured? Or are we pretty much going to be what we're looking at in 2025?
I would you need to at least, register to have to become an MSP. Sorry, I think my audio went a bit.
Yeah, I got you now. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, so I'd hope that at least there was some kind of like registry of MSP, some kind of vetting procedure, so people at least have access to some public data around MSP and maybe incidents in the past. Um,
Hmm. Almost like the HIPAA wall of shame.
yeah,
Hmm.
because I think, if you've had one incident, then hey, that could happen to anybody. But if you've had 20 in the past 2 weeks, then maybe you should be looking for another MSP.
It's interesting. I'm just thinking about this in like go out of technology land for 2 seconds. When you go and look at a new healthcare provider, could be a doctor, dentist, surgeon, specialist, whatever. How often do you think people go and see if they've been sued before?
Very little, yeah.
I
But
mean,
I
it's out
imagine that,
there, right? You could
yeah,
find it if you wanted to, but like probably don't look for that, do you?
right. I think the sad reality is I think people look at price probably first.
Yeah, you're probably right. You're probably right. Well, I hope that and we can talk forever, and it's been talked about ad nauseum, at least since I've been in the sandbox, about race to the bottom, commoditization of IT. Does the MSP can they run profitably at this point? And my response to all of that is, well, if you're the lowest cost and you're just fighting on price, is it worth it to still be in the business with the liability constraints on you? I would argue if that's the only game you're playing, it's not worth it.
Yeah, I think if you're getting customers based solely on price, you're probably not getting the best customers that are a good fit for a good MSP.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that the reality is that, like everything else, right? We talked about inflation, cost of money, and interest rates, all that. Like that cost of being in business does go up over time.
Yeah,
Any business, donut shop, whatever, right? So if you're constantly having to put your price down to win business, you're fighting, the world and the electricity, right? Like you're gonna need to reverse course at some point, or else you just be not making money or losing money.
yeah. I think like MSPs, or at least the one that I'm familiar with, people that I know, they may be afraid to raise prices from time to time because they've got loyal customers. But I think if you keep not raising the price, then eventually you're going to have to hit people with a big price hike instead of lots
It's
of
just
little
we
ones.
just talked about Microsoft, right?
Yeah,
Like they raised their price 3 times in 3 years, and could have done it all at once. You know what they tried to do all at once? They reversed course, and then they finally came back and did it a couple years later. The Microsoft Partner Program freebie licensing.
I
Remember at one
related. I didn't.
remember at one point, like it was like 2 or 3 years ago, they were like, "Hey, we're shutting this off," and then like there was like a
Yes.
massive like
Is
you
that
know
the action pack things that?
yeah, and
Yeah,
then
I
all of a
remember
sudden they
that.
were like, "We changed our mind. We're not taking it away," but now they've taken it away.
Wow.
But
So
it took 3 years later, right?
it is like you're getting less and less benefit to being a reseller and less benefit to showing loyalty. you're just a customer, I think.
Yeah, what they did was they said, "Hey, we'll give you some stuff under a new program that you have to do more in order to get to."
Oh yeah, and you got to pay for it.
Oh, nothing's for free, all
Yeah,
right? So
yeah,
I find it funny. Last year I was in a session and there were, I guess every year Microsoft revamps like all their promotions, just like any other company. And I was sitting in a half-hour session on what you have to do as a Microsoft partner to claim all of these things. And I was like, you almost need to pay a CPA to actually do all the paperwork they want in order to get the things that they're saying you can get. And I was like, at that point, the barrier to actually participating almost doesn't make sense. Like you'd
yeah.
have to be
Especially
doing a
for
lot of volume.
yeah, I think yeah, it's the smaller MSPs that suffer, isn't it? I think when things like that happen.
Yeah. That's so I guess coming back like full circle, like if you're gonna be in the technology business, you should be in it to be profitable. Just like any other business, you're not working for free. And I hope that you're not making enough that you're just created a job for yourself. Because I would argue, and I think it's a valid argument, that if I was working for somebody else, instead of all of the risks that I take as running my own business, probably have a lot less stress and a lot less to worry about.
Yeah, I think if you're going to start something yourself, then it really has to be worthwhile
And so,
because
how small is too small, and what is the smallest account that makes sense? Like, we've all been there, right? I remember when I started my MSP, it was me, and I did anything I could to get some money in the door, right? I was just starting out like everybody else, but I feel like the people that showed up in the beginning tend up to end almost always end up being not the right customer later on. So I digress. Oliver, tell me about the Cyber Hero program.
yeah, so that's what we were talking about earlier with our support team and the kind of 60-second response time. So um, we've got a team of guys and girls here in the office in Orlando, 24/7 support. We encourage our customers to come and start a chat first. We respond within 60 seconds. We generally offer Zoom sessions and we'll record the sessions, give them access to the recordings, really to try and empower them to not have to rely on us. Obviously, we welcome them coming to us, but we want to be able to, assist them in making it a success by making sure they understand. So if any of our customers are listening to this and they don't talk to us regularly, just click on the help button, hop into a chat, and
So this is just the support function, right? Like
exactly,
your
yeah,
experience as a partner. But I'm going back to two Zero Trust Worlds ago. Didn't you guys roll out a managed offering, like a SOC style solution?
yeah. So we have something called Cyber Hero Management. Um, So if your Threatlocker agent is secured, if we look at the application allow listing, if someone tries to execute something that isn't currently permitted on their machine, it's
Mhm.
blocked. They're going to see a pop-up. Um, rather than sending that request to the MSP, who has to kind of vet it and figure out if they need to say yes or no, they can elect to send those requests to us, and we will vet it and then approve or deny based on the guidelines that we set with them.
I assume there's a pricing difference between managing it yourself
Yeah,
versus okay.
yeah, a little extra,
That
per
was an
user per
obvious
month.
question, but yeah.
But but quite honestly, though, if the MSP works with their solutions engineer at the beginning, at the onboarding stage, and they allow us to work with them and tune things, they shouldn't even need that service, to be perfectly honest, because things that they want people to run should continue to run. They should continue to update. It's only really brand new things. If people are getting things blocked constantly and having to request access to things, then something isn't right, and they need to work with us.
You know who's always getting things blocked and asking to it's the check signer, it's the CEO, the owner.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's always the one that signs the checks that has the hard time,
And that's the person
unfortunately.
who usually is the one that thinks that they're never going to have a hack.
Yeah, turn this off. I don't need it. I know what I'm doing.
Never ends up well.
No, like you say, it's the most valuable people with the most valuable data that generally want the least restriction.
100%. Oliver, I would say, where are we going to see you next? But I guess you could be a candidate at 50 potential events a month. Is there anything that you're going to specifically in the next little while?
Specifically, no. I've literally just moved down, so I've asked for some time just to kind of get settled in here at the office. But I'd say probably towards the end of the year, I'm sure I'll be put somewhere. But otherwise, webinars. Hope to join you on another one of these, George, in the future as well.
Absolutely. Wow. I mean, you guys keep, I mean, the amount of products that you've put out in like a short, like 1, 2, 3 years, like it's pretty impressive. I gotta give, Danny and their team over there a lot of kudos, right? You guys are working at some warp speed magic over there. Maybe like everybody took a page out of the Disney book, and like, you're all drinking from the same water down there in Orlando,
That
and
must be what it is. But
I don't
yeah,
know.
got lots of developers running around, excited at the moment. That's one word for it.
Hey, if it's excited versus depressed, I'll take excited every time.
There we go.
100%. Guys, check out Threatlocker, threatlocker.com. And Oliver is a pretty nice guy. If you want to look him up online and ask him some questions, I'm sure he'll definitely take that opportunity
Absolutely.
and talk with you. So definitely Google him, LinkedIn, whatever. Oliver is now in East Coast time in a
Yes.
warm weather climate.
Bit too warm. Thanks,
Come on,
George.
you would. Do you really prefer the cold versus the warm?
No, I just like to complain.
Yeah, fair. I think I'm ready for a little warm, to be honest.
Good.
Um, Guys, this session was absolutely recorded. We're gonna post it up on mspinitiative.com and the YouTube and the podcatchers. Obviously want to continue bringing you relevant information from around the sandbox, because the more we learn, the more you learn. That's why we do these. Hopefully you find them valuable. Definitely, in the next less than 30 days, if you're going to be in Dublin for DattoCon Dublin, or if you're going to be in Tampa for Flow, a Roost event, we'll be there and we'll be throwing some community events for you. Cost you absolutely nothing if you're an MSP to join us. So head our website, mspinitiative.com, and register if you think you can make it either of those. We'd love to see you. Oliver, I'm sure we'll talk in the next little while. But catch you on the flip side, and take it easy, everyone.